After everything, especially the neural link, I was just so worn out. So when the Vendrix woman Marilla came up, I sighed. I knew this would be yet another thing before she started speaking.
Greetings. You must be Keith. I am Marilla, and I believe we need to speak as a group.
Yeah, I'm Keith, but you're gonna have to give a minute here now. I need a proper wash-up before I go having a chat with y'all. My apologies for not being here to greet y'all when you arrived, but things went kinda sideways on me there for a bit.
Marilla bowed her head a slight bit in acknowledgement.
That is fully understandable, but I do believe we have a number of things to discuss that are of import.
I nodded, made my excuses, and went over to where we had rigged up the shower. I washed everything up and got myself changed into a different shirt, then came back out. This whole past week had been one insane thing after another, and it wasn't slowing down. Now the INOD presented a new issue, beyond the baby. We hadn't gone looking for them. They had come looking for us. Yeah, it was optimal for what I was going for, but at the same time, it was a huge issue. I checked on Nogrex, and it wasn't just the overexertion, but he clearly hadn't been eating properly. I called Ducky over and had her bring him hot broth and to let him rest. Marilla was waiting by the fire, and she wasn't alone. Treg had wandered off, but his companion was there, as was Azoku and Val. Prodigal and Hearth were going dormant for the evening, and I could hear the sounds of Ragnar and Greltha getting to work. The timing did seem rather intentional, and Marilla as well as confirmed this when I approached.
Ah, Keith, good. Are we ready to talk?
Apparently, we need to talk as a mood-transcended species lines.
I imagine so. Let me start off here. I'm Keith Morehouse, of Earth, and I've realized that there's a flaw in the game. The basic principle of these games is that it goes until only one species remains. If all of us unify, however, then that state can't occur, and we can block the game. It's like cooperative games on Earth, where we're not really playing against one another, but the game itself. That's the situation here.
Marilla did that same slow head bow.
As may be, but we need to speak on more practical concerns. The reason we have these particular people is specific. Obviously, Val is your compatriot, myself to represent the Vendrix, Hoda here for the Gol, and Azaku for the Vergal. We did not bring in the Rothani or the Asu because really, any of them will simply do whatever you say. The Inad would be here, but they are all currently indisposed, and the Trills have a dormancy period they must observe. You have added 9 mouths to your tribe, Keith, and it has problems, especially since 3 of those new mouths are all medically unable to do anything of current, and our leader is crippled.
She wasn't precisely attacking, but she was definitely making aggressive moves. Thankfully, Azaku spoke up.
In fairness, Keith is healing from the cougar fight, and according to him, will be back to health in a matter of weeks. Even injured, though, Keith is the reason we had a steady supply of fish to supplement my and Chathuxel's hunting. He's also made a number of the traps and snares that we use, and designed the shelters we're using.
That comment threw Marilla for a moment, but she regained herself.
It still stands that we do not necessarily have an unlimited set of supplies, and yet you still fight to bring all of the other species into this tribe, even the sick and the injured.
She was making a play for both leadership and to try and limit the field. She was being polite about it, but she had a clear agenda, and it was time to put a check to it.
Yes, we are. That is the decision Val and I came to. Now sure, we could have let the Gol kick 3 kinds of shit out of you.
Hoda grinned malevolently.
But fact is, we made that choice. Now if y'all have a problem with following that, then put frankly, you're free to fuck off to whatever part of the planet you choose, since y'all were doing so great prior to this that y'all were willing to get into a 7-on-2 fight for a single deer.
That one hurt her, and she stumbled a moment. I decided not to give her the time.
Now, I'm willing to hear suggestions on how to make sure everyone gets fed, but make no bones, just 'cause I talk slow, it don't mean I'm stupid. I promised Ravajatik when I threatened him that I'd protect them all, and I mean to honor my word. You can be a part of that or not, but what I'm not gonna do is get backed into a corner on this.
Hoda's grin intensified. For her at least, and I imagine Treg, the direct approach to it was best.
Look, I get it. You're in a new group, and you're looking to make your place in it. But this ain't gonna be your show. So, what solutions you got for where we're at?
Her eyes narrowed a moment, but then went back to her merchant speech.
Well, I would say, obviously, that the shelters need to be completed. It seems you've been working on a clay kiln, which is good, but I can improve that. We need everyone assigned to tasks and a schedule for them, and with so many different species, we need some form of leadership aside from whatever you and Val come up with.
Her points weren't entirely wrong.
I'll think about the leadership thing, but honestly, right now, we gotta be focused on getting ourselves ready. Weather's been playing nice with us this past week, but something's brewing with those clouds I'm seeing. Aside from that, we're pulling in plants for crops, and the hunting and fishing is pretty good.
Marilla cocked her head quickly to the side.
No, they're not. They were good when you first started, but there are 17 of us now. Even if the trails don't properly eat, and the baby gets its food from its mother, that's 15, and the mother will need extra food just to stay healthy to feed her baby. Simple hunting is not going to be enough for that, especially on foot.
I inhaled slowly, then held my breath a second.
Well, there's a fair, simple way of getting around that. We cheat.
Now she looked confused.
All right, so earlier, I did this whole neural link thing with Hearth and Prodigal, and while I was linked up, I got some of their senses and whatnot. So apparently, they don't just sense advanced minds, they sense all minds. There ain't been much of a reason for them to do anything with it, since, like you said, they don't really eat. But they can sense the minds of animals and whatnot on about them. If we send them with the hunting team, we can use that for hunting.
And once again, everyone's just staring at me. Marilla blinked a couple times.
You let an alien species link your mind elsewhere? Why would you do that? Is that why Azaku was saying you weren't well when we arrived?
Yeah, pretty much. But truth is, the problem wasn't the link. It was when they cut it. They just shut it down immediately, like they would with one of theirs. I wasn't ready for the shift back. Sorta like if you were deep in the ocean, then instantly above the surface, what the pressure change would do to you, and, well, yeah, got kind of a hangover going. But other than that, I'm fine. Not even the worst one I've had, by far.
And having been a combat medic in wartime, that was unfortunately true. Marilla mad exasperated exhale that wasn't quite a sigh.
I don't understand your species.
Val smiled a bit.
Neither do we. Now there's still a hunting issue, 'cause even with Prodigal going with the hunting team, there's the weight limits, and if we overhunt, we'll be in trouble. Then there's the caloric expense of the hunting itself. We need a way to start bringing animals in, just like if we were ranching on Earth.
Oh, this is gonna be like that Monster Rancher game I used to play on deployment. Sorry, lost in thought. Alright, so, I think Hearth and Prodigal can help with that. Help us find the animals. Figure we get ourselves some of the birds, clip wings, and that'll give us some meat right there. Plus the eggs and feathers, unless we can find us some yard birds around here. Figure, grab a few of those deer and fence them in proper. That'd even help our farming, since we'd be getting fertilizer from it. Speaking of farms, we need to get serious about the planting part of it. Spring's moving along, and I want to make sure we're ready to go on that. As to teams, figure Traeg, Azoku, and Prodigal for the hunt team. Farming team's gonna be Val, along with Hoda, Marilla, and Inducky. Fishin's gonna be me, along with Nogrex when he's ready to move. That should be enough, since we got the nets. Then there's Scavenge team, which is Shin and the Skrens. Hearth stays to camp, since he's essentially the hub for Prodigal, and he can help out there. I'll also be working on whatever else I can on my end. Pretty much everyone else is going on the build team with Ragnar and Greltha, to get us our shelters up.
Marilla was taking notes now as I spoke, but didn't interrupt, waiting for me to finish.
We have other things we need to look at as well. For one, storage. The containers are good enough for a number of things, being fully air and watertight, but we need more. Clay pots are good for that, but if want year-round growth, we need glass to make a hothouse. For that, we need sand from the beach, as well as salt for pickling and preserving, which brings us back to the beach. I would propose we cut a path or road to the beach for easier travel. But I'd like to bring up another thing, transportation. No offense to the Ghoul, Vergal, and humans, but most of the rest of us aren't really built for the level of walking and running we keep having to do. You mentioned that the trills were able to sense the thoughts of animals. Could they also communicate with them? Because if so, then we could bring in species that would be able to serve as mounts.
I scratched at the stubble on my chin.
I hadn't rightly thought of that, Miss Marilla, but I'm pretty sure they can do that. And it would help us out in the long run. It'd also let us explore more. Maybe even find the source of the iron we've been finding along the river north of here.
How do you know that the trills can do that?
Marilla sat pensively, setting down her piece of charcoal.
Oh, well, I mean, it's kinda conjecture, I'll admit. But the theory's sound, all figured. So, like, they can sense minds around them, just like we hear, see, or feel. Their telepathy lets them get on in there and communicate around language gaps. That should mean they could actually be talking with the various critters about. That makes sense to you, Miss Marilla?
I mean, the explanation makes sense, Keith, but that's not what I'm asking you. How do you know ways to use their abilities?
She was sitting forward now, and her curiosity wouldn't be denied. It seemed simple from my perspective, but I could see the others were a bit fascinated as well, except Val, who seemed to understand the question and was choking back laughter.
Well, I mean, I don't really, other than the fragments I picked up when I was linked with them earlier. The other stuff's just based on things I learned about potential ways mental powers might work, you know?
Marilla was now showing agitation.
Okay, let's make this simple. Are there humans with mental abilities along the lines of the trills?
I shook my head and shrugged.
Well, not per se, I reckon. But it's stuff we've thought about a lot.
She took a breath and closed her eyes for a second before responding, and Val was steadily losing the fight to keep from laughing.
In answer to your previous question, no, we don't know. Aside from you two, no one here knows how you keep coming up with new ways to use the abilities of the trills. By your own statement, your species doesn't even have abilities like they do. I talked with Prodigal and Hearth, and even they're not clear on how you keep thinking about ways to use their capabilities, that even they haven't considered some of them despite living with these abilities their whole lives.
Val finally lost the fight and was nearly crying. She was laughing so hard. It brought the others around to her, and she spoke up as she wiped a tear from her eye.
Sorry. I know this is a serious conversation, but the answer's just ridiculous. Keith, I don't think any of these species, or the Kathrall, have science fiction.
Well, shit. I'd been making the assumption that all these various species had stories of the supernatural from their species' perspective, because why wouldn't they? Because humans are different.
Shit. Sorry, okay. So on Earth, we have a pretty massive set of industries built around entertainment. One of our favorite pastimes as a species is creating made-up stories in various mediums. A large genre of this is called science fiction. Basically, it's a bunch of stories based around scientific principles, hypotheses, and theories. Of these stories, ones about supernatural abilities are a huge thing. For instance, what we call superheroes. As an example of that one, you've got Jean Grey, who in the stories is an incredibly power telepath.
Marilla's facade slipped. She was just gawking at me, and I realized I'd just blown the minds of every non-human listening. There had to be a better way to explain. Got it. I hit the green button on my wristband, and up popped Annabelle.
Hey, Miss Annabelle. Sorry to be disturbing this evening, but I need a favor if and you can. Could you stream us a movie on this screen? Let me think. Let's go with The Last Starfighter, thanks.
Annabelle nodded, not quite sure what was going on, but a guy in a Tron shirt came on screen for a moment, and after about 10-15 minutes, Annabelle cut away. I figured that the Kathrall had not thought of this in the rules, since, why would they? Who is going to call out to watch a random movie from their homeworld in the middle of a survival game? While that was in the works, I decided to press my luck and called out,
Hey, Ravajatik. Need to have a word with you. Donut ain't bad, just some tech support shit. We'll be having another chat later about some stuff.
Ravajatik's screen popped up, and the man looked nervous.
And what is it that you wanted to ask me, Survivor Keith?
Well, about my screen with Annabelle. Can I increase the screen size? It's a bit small for what I'm trying to do here.
Ravajatik seemed confused for a moment, but dismissed it.
Yes, it's simple enough. There's an icon in the lower left corner. If you press it, there will be a bar that can resize the image. Why do you need it larger?
So I can show the tribe something from back home. Thanks.
And broke the connection. I fiddled with the wristband controls from there, not only finding the controls to increase size, but volume, subtitles. There was even one for setting a fixed projection so I wouldn't have to stay still. Annabelle came back and apparently had gotten the go-ahead from her higher-ups. I set the screen to the size of a proper theater screen and got the volume up, then stabilized it. The screen went black for a moment, and up came the beginning of The Last Starfighter. Val came over to sit with me.
You know, I've never seen this movie.
I smiled.
I figured. Does this feel like a weird waste of time?
Her smile brightened even more.
Absolutely. And that's what's great about it. Everyone here's just been thinking about survival for a week, and it's like you said, we have to stop surviving as fast as possible. This is part of that.
Several flashes of light went off behind us, and we looked back to see bags had been transported in. Inside the bags, it looked like a gang of overhyped 12-year-old had raided a concession stand. One of the bags was literally just a giant bag of movie theater popcorn, still warm. Others contained various kinds of pop and just so much candy. Yet another bag had movie theater buckets in it, from the Baghdad Theater in downtown Portland. Since I already knew the movie cold, I worked concessions, bringing stuff to everyone. It was like one of those summer movies in the park back home, and when I came back, I brought 2 of the Afghans with me for me and Val to relax on and cover up with as the cooler air of the night came in. And that is how 8 different alien species came to be watching The Last Starfighter on an uncolonized alien planet. As the movie went on, I wanted to see how the others were reacting to it, but became distracted when Val snuggled into me. It had been way too long since I'd felt that weight of another person on me, and on instinct, I kissed her on the temple as I settled in, and we just laid there on our blanket, watching. At a certain point, I wasn't really watching the movie anymore, and just lying there with Val, lightly stroking her hair, until she looked up at me. And we paused there for a moment, and I laid one hand on her cheek, not even noticing the shoulder pain, then leaned in, and there, I kissed Val for the first time, and she kissed back. Every fiber of me wanted to deepen it, but there were rather a few people there, so we just sort of stayed there for a while until I heard a slight coughing noise. It was Marilla, who looked like she was a teacher who'd caught us making out behind the bleachers.
So, the movie is over. I have a lot of questions.
Val laughed into my chest, and I could feel her blushing.
Yeah, just give a minute.
Marilla smirked.
Only a minute?
She walked off, and I closed the holo screen.
I really want to continue this, but
Val kissed me.
we're the only 2 humans stranded on an alien world. We've got time. I'm gonna go freshen up.
Everyone was waiting around the fire for me, and it was clear that we had not been quite as discreet as we thought we had. Ducky was nearly vibrating.
All right, so what did everyone think of the movie?
Marilla quirked an eyebrow, and her smile was nearly predatory.
Oh, it was an interesting affair, to be sure. These movies are common on your world?
I nodded, avoiding the baited words.
Oh yeah, we make things like that constantly, for over 100 years now. They vary by what era of filmmaking, genre, and whatnot.
And none of those alien races were real?
She seemed particularly interested in that point.
No, just stuff we made up for our amusement.
I shrugged.
How many of these movies are there?
Marilla was coming to a point.
Thousands upon thousands of them.
So that's how your species knows so much. You're not a species of geniuses, in so much as you've simply kept making things up. And now, the things you've made up have proven to be at least peripherally true. And, because you made up so many different things, that's why you're able to think around abilities like the trails possibly better than they can.
She said matter-of-factly. She wasn't asking, she was informing her conclusion.
I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but it sounds about right, I reckon.
Azaku joined the conversation now.
And how many of these movies of yours concern humanity fighting against technologically superior species?
I held up my hands, trying to find a better answer, but I'd have to stick with the truth.
I don't know how many, but it's a lot. But sometimes we also imagine ourselves as the bad guys. Hell, some stories don't even have humans in them at all. Generally, when we make up a species, we use ourselves as the average and make the species around various virtues and vices of humanity, so they're usually more of an allegory for ourselves.
Trade cut in.
I like Grig. One starfighter against the Armada. He is a strong warrior.
We discussed the movie back and forth for a time, answering various questions about humanity, our imagining of the alien species, and other general stuff they liked or didn't like about the movie. It was almost a totally normal discussion, if not for the game, until another thing happened. Ragnar shook his head, throwing up his arms in a way that I had done a few times this past week.
I just don't understand how a united species could dream up so many conflicts.
I nearly choked on my Dr. Pepper.
What?
Hey everyone, hope you loved the video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe for more awesome sci-fi content. You can also support us by hitting the thanks button or becoming a channel member. Your generosity helps us bring you more stellar stories. Every bit counts. Thanks a bunch.